My psycho sister threw our baby sister down the stairs and dad rewarded her, so 40 years later, I sent her police records to everyone. Hi, Reddit. Long-time lurker, first-time poster in this sub. I have changed some details to protect the innocent, but the core of this story is true as I am currently living it. I, 45M, am embroiled in family drama that has been simmering for decades. About a week and a half ago, I was in a pretty bad car accident. I underwent spinal surgery and have been recovering nicely while on a wonderful cocktail of medically prescribed drugs. The accident itself isn't important, but I think the medications may have affected how I responded to everything that followed. Also, my family and I are African American. This is important context given the cultural climate in the United States. I am the oldest of three, with two younger sisters, Karen, 42F, and Katie, 39F. Katie and I have always gotten along fairly well, but my relationship with Karen has been strained pretty much from the beginning, for reasons that will become clear. I said this has been simmering for decades, so let's start at the beginning. My parents always said I was a loving and attentive big brother when we were little, but that all changed one Saturday afternoon when Katie was only a few months old. My dad was out, and my mom was catching up on laundry in the basement. Katie was napping in her crib in my parents' room, and I was rummaging for snacks in the kitchen. As I returned to my spot in front of the living room TV, I saw Karen standing at the top of the steps holding Katie. In our house, the steps to the second floor were on the far side of the living room. Then she threw her. I didn't think. I just reacted. I dropped my bowl of popcorn, ran, and dove. I must have had an angel on my side because that catch was immaculate. Yes, I know this sounds so cartoonishly evil that it's hard to believe. I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't lived it. But years later, Katie would confide in me that she knew exactly what she was doing. And it would eventually be corroborated by another source, more on that. The baby cried, and my mom came rushing in. Karen smiled and said that I had taken the baby because I wanted to play with her. Before I could say anything, I was punished for spilling popcorn and waking my sister. After that, most of my childhood memories seem fairly typical for someone who grew up in the 80s and 90s. I remember being kind of a jerky big brother at times, teasing Karen about her fashion choices. What stands out is that her responses were almost never proportionate. I thought this was how kids learned how to human, she thought this was how kids learned how to shank. For example, I would make fun of her for getting a perm, and she would pull a knife on me. Yes, I do have a few physical scars from these encounters. She would demand I drive her somewhere, I would say no, and then my tires would be flattened. I would be at baseball practice, she'd walk to the outfield fence and yell that my grandma died. This is actually how I learned of my paternal grandmother's passing. My parents always told me to stop antagonizing her. Or they would make excuses for her behavior: stress, sibling rivalry, medication side effects, traumatic head injury, and so on. I tried not to let it get to me and became more self-sufficient and distant. As a latchkey kid, I already had plenty of practice. I spent a lot of time in the woods, at friends' houses, or sequestered in my room when I was home. When I graduated, I moved out and largely forgot about the more psychotic behavior of my sister, though my dad would fill me in on the crazier stories during our weekly calls. There was the time Karen attacked Katie in a grocery store. Karen was the aggressor, then she called the police herself. After taking statements and looking at the injuries, the officers arrested Karen. My parents let her sit in lockup for the entire weekend hoping she would learn her lesson. Spoiler, it did not. Around this time, she became a teen mom to a special needs child. I could write an entire book about how she handled that, but no one would believe it either. Suffice it to say, it did not lead to maturity. I was living 2 hours away at the time, so I do not know everything she was doing. What I was told is that she had a habit of dropping her child off with relatives and then disappearing for days at a time. Everyone in my family insists it was not drug-related. I honestly do not know. What I do know is that one day she and the baby's father showed up at my door with my nephew, barged inside, dropped the child, and ran off while my back was turned. Calls and texts were ignored. I should have called Child Protective Services, but my parents told me not to. They said if Karen didn't come back by Monday morning, they would pick up my nephew. For 36 hours, I did my best to care for a nonverbal special needs toddler. Honestly, my nephew's sweet smile was what made me first seriously suspect that my sister might be clinically psychotic. It completely boggled my mind that someone could abandon their own child, even for just a few days. This pattern continued until her second child graduated high school last year. She never did it to me again, but my parents have had countless plans and vacations cancelled because Karen simply could not be bothered to parent her own children. A few months after that incident, I had graduated and was living with my dad temporarily while figuring out my next steps. I was keeping a low profile, doing freelance coding work, and saving money. I had been there about a week when Karen and her baby daddy asked me to babysit at the last minute. I told them I couldn't because I was on a deadline and working, hoping it would lead to more work or a full-time job. Karen did not like that answer. I absolutely said something rude without looking up from my screen. She immediately started screaming that I had punched her in the head. She called the police and tried to file assault charges. To his credit, the baby daddy said he didn't see anything and didn't want to get involved. The officer took statements, found no injuries, and then asked me if I had somewhere safe to go. He said he didn't want to leave me there with her, but also didn't want them removed because of the baby. I ended up crashing with a friend, missing my deadline, and deciding I needed to get away from her. The next day, I started planning to move out of state. That was 18 years ago. My dad still asks when I'm moving back to take over the family business. I always say I have no interest. The truth is I would love to, but I don't want my sister anywhere near my life. There are any more examples of toxic behavior, rewriting history, co-opting other people's trauma, and weaponizing the police against family members. This is already long, so I'll spare you the rest. Fast forward to recently. I'm recovering from my accident at home, enjoying my prescribed narcotics and watching football, when my dad calls to complain about Karen. Apparently, she has been calling the police on him or his customers for trespassing every other day for 2 months. Karen and her baby daddy-turned-husband lost their house and have been living in a small one-bedroom apartment above the family store with their youngest, who just started college. Niece had the option to move into the spare bedroom at my parents' but declined for whatever reason. Not every time, but sometimes when customers enter the store she would just get upset, start yelling, and call the cops. My dad acted like this behavior was brand new. I snapped. I told him he couldn't be shocked or upset when he has spent 4 decades coddling her, making excuses, and refusing to force her to get help for her very obvious mental health issues. For context, my family has never shied away from mental health care. 30 years ago this week, my parents had me locked in a psych ward for a week over a depressing doodle I drew in class. After observation and interviews with both me and my parents, individually and in a group setting, the doctors told me it was amazing I was as well adjusted as I was. Certified not crazy. Dad refused to hear any of it, then he brought the issue to the family group chat. At that point I said, screw it, I've got time. I laid out a timeline of everything Karen has done since childhood. I deliberately left out the worst things that could irreparably damage her relationship with her kids. Even when I am angry, I have been conditioned to protect her. I also included publicly available booking records and court documents to back up what I could, because evidence matters. My dad called me stunned. While on the phone, he asked my mom about it. She confirmed everything, including Karen throwing Katie down the stairs. Apparently, she saw my diving catch and punished me anyway. I'm probably not as livid as I should be about that. Katie texted me privately, thanking me for finally saying something. Karen went live and posted a bunch of fabricated nonsense about my father and me. I blocked her and told my family I was done. I set a boundary and asked them to respect it. I had been low contact for years, so going no contact was easy for me. All I asked was that they not share information about me, my wife, or our kids with Karen. Everyone agreed. Within 15 hours, my mom was trying to arrange a call to talk it out. Because she's my mom, I agreed to listen. Less than 15 seconds in, Karen was screaming her version of history again. When I calmly said our father never beat her or threw her down the stairs, she replied, "It doesn't matter if it actually happened. It's how I feel, and my feelings are valid." I told my mom I loved her and hung up. Back in the new family chat without Karen, her husband, or her kids, my dad tried to downplay everything again. I told them I would no longer participate in my sister's delusions and that my boundary stood until she got professional help. I was done. Karen continued posting rambling rants, which I ignored. Then I found out my parents were trying to set up another conversation. I politely declined. They persisted until my wife stepped in and told them to leave me alone so I could recover. That finally worked. Then this morning I woke up to a Facebook post from Katie discussing the drama and tagging both Karen and me, encouraging us to work it out. I untagged myself and restated my boundaries in the family chat. Several relatives began gaslighting me, saying I needed to be the bigger person and that this is just how she is. What broke me was my dad telling me I was obsessed with Karen and needed self-reflection to become a better person. I snapped. I told him I am the only one in this family who consistently takes responsibility for my actions. I am the only one who has done years of therapy to break the generational curse he helped create. That part felt justified. Then I gathered every receipt, every trauma, lie, and documented incident, put it into a neat little holiday e-card, and sent it to every close friend, relative, and extended family member, including my sweet 101-year-old grandmother. Now I worry I went too far. So Reddit, am I the asshole? I fell asleep. When I woke up several hours later, the only people who had contacted me were a few of Katie's daughters, telling me they understood where I was coming from and that they love and support me. They are good eggs. I love them very much. I thought that maybe, just maybe, with all the receipts laid out in front of them, my parents and Karen would have a come to Jeebus moment. I hoped they would recognize the errors of their ways and take the first steps toward fixing the abusive relationship they have built. I was wrong. My mother backtracked on everything she acknowledged on Sunday. I do not know if she truly feels that way or if she was bullied into compliance. At this point, it does not really matter. My dad posted in the family chat about how disappointing it was to learn all of this for the first time. I really wanted to scream, "Bitch, you was there for half of it." Instead, I had a realization. Karen is his daughter. That is where she gets it from. They are both stubborn, are never wrong, and absolutely hate it when you can prove otherwise. They are both toxic. I love them both, but I'm not going to subject to that. I responded in the group chat by saying, I have nothing more to say on this matter. Please respect my boundary. Not even 30 seconds later, I received a text directly from my dad outside the family chat. It was a wall of text asking me to reconsider cutting Karen out of my life. It was deeply manipulative and completely ignored all of the issues I'd called attention to. Before I could respond, my wife Amanda, 41F, took the phone from me and told me not to think about it. She then proceeded to write a double wall of text calling him out on his failures as a father, a husband, and a human being. She addressed his failure to protect Katie and me as children, his obliviousness to what was happening under his own roof, his constant enabling and encouragement of Karen's behavior, and made it clear that this was no longer just about Karen. Until he fixes himself, he will not have access to his grandchildren. He promptly announced, I'm not going to read all of that. Amanda told him to have a Merry Christmas but to not bother contacting anyone here again until he is ready to behave like an adult. That was yesterday evening around 7-ish, I think. Time has no meaning for me at the moment. He has not attempted to contact me since. Truly, Amanda is the hero of this story. Enduring my family's nonsense must have earned me enough karma points to meet her, and for that alone it was worth it. That is where things stand now on Christmas Eve. I think Katie and I will be fine. I know she did not mean anything by her Facebook post. She was trying to be funny, because we have used dark humor to survive family drama since forever. I am going low contact with my mom until she shows me how she wants to move forward. I am no contact with both Karen and my dad. My niece told me Karen continues to go live to her 2 followers and post unhinged rants filled with baseless accusations. There is nothing I can do about that except ignore it. If I lived closer, I would file for a restraining order, because I know for a fact her state issued her a concealed carry permit and she always has a firearm on her. Murica, am I right? I do keep my doors locked, I do have cameras watching all entrances, and my kids know not to answer the door for Aunt Karen. As for everyone on my Christmas card list, I honestly do not know if they are all quietly sipping tea and watching the drama unfold, or if they simply never opened them because it is 2025 and who even knew e-cards were still a thing. To the person who suggested I write all of this as a book with receipts and publish it for free online, I like where your head is at, but I would feel compelled to include all the dirty laundry. That would destroy my credibility. Karen used to watch Jerry Springer and Maury Povich every single day. It is as if she decided her life needed that level of drama constantly. The things she has done are so far-fetched that even I sometimes think there is no way they could have happened, despite knowing they absolutely did. Here is one example that is fresh in my mind because I brought it up with my dad as evidence of his enabling behavior. After Karen's special needs son was born, there was a question of paternity. She insisted the father was not the guy who lived down the street but instead a grown-ass man who lived across the country whom she ran off with for a few weeks during her senior year of high school. A DNA test proved he was not the father. Karen went on a tirade claiming he somehow cheated on the DNA test by sending his identical cousin to be swabbed in his place. Me, being a nerd, pointed out that if it were his cousin, the DNA test would still show a familial relationship. It did not. I also pointed out that the timeline did not line up that well and that she would have had to have already been 3 months pregnant when she ran off with dude. None of that mattered. My evil muppet of a sister convinced our father to drive her across the country to confront this man and his parents. They drove together for multiple days, across multiple states, and showed up at the front door of a man who a DNA test had already proven was not the father of her child. Dad always said that he was the voice reason and stopped things from escalating any farther, but the fact he went along with it at all is bat poop. Spoiler alert, it turns out no amount of screaming, shouting, threatening, or breaking things changes DNA results. The guy from down the street was the baby daddy and he would eventually marry Karen. When I brought up that incident, Dad laughed it off and acted like it was weird that I even remember that. He was freaking proud of his role in all of that. But do you see how that sounds so insane that no reasonable person would believe it, despite it being 100% factual? These people exist and we should all be very afraid. Especially me because I have to hope and pray to all the gods both old and new that I didn't pass on the crazy gene to one of my kids. Anyway, thank you to everyone who responded to the original post. Realizing just how much my dad sucks was not the update I wanted. I have loved and looked up to that man my entire life. This whole thing has been both eye-opening and heartbreaking. I know nothing that has transpired over the last few days is my fault, but there is a part of me that wishes I had just let Dad vent on Saturday instead of agreeing with him and offering more evidence to support what he was saying. There was comfort in the status quo. But a bigger part of me is glad I am becoming the kind of adult I needed in my life when I was a kid. If anything else happens, I will update. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a safe and happy holiday, no matter what you celebrate. I had a very brief text exchange with my dad on Christmas morning. He reiterated that he did not know about many of the issues that happened between Karen and me. I had to admit that this is probably true, and at least partially my fault. I experienced an unrelated childhood trauma when I was 7 or 8. Unrelated in the sense that it was not caused by anyone in my family, though it became semi-related years later when Karen began claiming that it had happened to her and not me. Co-opting trauma is gross. It took a few years, moving to a new neighborhood, and an episode of America's Most Wanted where John Walsh pleaded with kids to tell a trusted adult if something bad had happened to them. After seeing that episode, I told my mom in great detail what had happened to me. As far as I know, nothing was done after that. I do not know if she told my dad or if she decided that since the danger had passed, it could be ignored. What I do know is that she never talked to me about it again. That silence felt like a second betrayal. I decided at that point that I was on my own when it came to dealing with the things that happened to me. I've dealt with this in therapy but have not addressed it with my parents yet. Combine that with my dad being at work most of the time, and I never told him about many of the things Karen did to me. I never told him any of it. So when he said he did not know, I acknowledged that he was likely right. I had not told him about some of the things that happened when he was not around. Because it was Christmas, I wanted to keep the exchange cordial. I did call him out for his role in starting everything with Karen over the past week, for keeping it going, and for acting like a child when he realized he was talking to Amanda instead of me. He acknowledged that, but still did not apologize. I told him that he, my mother, and I will need to have a conversation at some point when I am feeling better. That is where we left it for now. Sorry, it is not much of an update. It will probably be a few weeks before I have more to share. When we do talk, I plan to bring up everything. That includes the trust issues I developed because of my mom's response when I told her about what happened to me, the things Karen did to me over the years, and the harm Karen has caused to our family and to others. I will update again once that conversation happens and let you know what the fallout looks like.